Judy. It is a real privilege to be with you and everyone online as well. Again, my name's Dave Dean, and I live just up the road here in Newcastle, where it's 5 minutes to get anywhere, including the beach, and 2 minutes to get a park. I got to say, I do not envy the parking in this city of Sydney. I spent 14 years, just as a bit of background for me, I spent 14 years as an engineer in the defence and aerospace industry. You trusted me with your taxpayer money. Those very expensive fighter jet aircraft, I was involved in the training of the pilots there. And so that was a lot of fun, and I got a lot of exposure to a lot of interesting things. But in the last bit more than a year, I've taken a pretty sharp turn out of that career, and now I'm working, as Judy said, with Questioning Christianity, a bit of a mouthful, QC for short. And what we do is really quite simple. We just help people explore life's deepest questions and connect those to the Christian story. So questions of faith, questions of meaning, questions of purpose, identity, and God. And I think that's what you're doing here at Haven Church of Christ in this series, Ask a Friend. So last week, I understand you kicked that off with a question of baptism. Today, we're going to kick that off now with a very big question, a very broad question, and a very relevant question, and that is, why Jesus? Why Jesus? You don't really get much bigger than that, do you? Why Jesus? Particularly in a world like ours today. Hey, I mean, we just had a federal election. Still trying to figure out what that means. I don't know how you're feeling as you sit here today. If you've got a mortgage, I know how you're feeling. You're feeling the pain of interest rate hikes. As we look online and read our news feeds, we have wars and trade wars tearing up our world. And here we are now on a Sunday morning spending 30, 40 minutes to talk about some carpenter from 2,000 years ago. What are we doing here? Why Jesus? That is the question on the table here. And I want to suggest that part of the reason has to do with the fact that beneath headlines today are these other things called values. Concerns for justice, identity, meaning, truth, freedom, dignity. Values like that, you just don't dig them up out of the dirt out there in the bush. You don't just download them from the ether. These are invisible things that are a part of the stories we tell as human beings to make sense of the world around us. I don't mean, therefore, that they're like children's stories or fictitious or anything like that. I just mean that these are part of the ways that we make sense of the world around us. So here's my take today. At the end of the day, I don't think we need more information to make sense of all of these concerns that are weighing in on us as 21st century Aussies. I think we need a better story. And that's what I hope to show you today from the Bible. We're going to do it by immersing ourselves into a story here, into one of the biographies of Jesus. It's the Gospel of John. And the story in particular is a really beautiful one. It's a really moving. It's the story of the Samaritan woman, the woman at the well. And by way of outline, if you're a note taker, this is the engineering in my brain. I've got 3 points for you. So scene one here, one story with 3 scenes. Scene 1 here is recognition. Scene 2 here is satisfaction. And scene 3 here is transformation. We're just going to walk through these as we go. So first of all, scene number 1, recognition. Again, I want to immerse you in the story. So we're going to be a little bit cinematic, a little bit dramatic here. So just come on this journey with me. Shut your eyes, do whatever you want to do to feel comfortable. Let's try and travel back now 2,000 years ago to a dusty field on the edge of a first century village called Sychar in a region known as Samaria. It's the middle of the day. It's the hottest part of the day. The sun is hanging high over the rugged hills. Heat is shimmering off the rocks and bouncing off the pale, brittle grass. No one in their right mind is out at this time of day. But then through the mirage, someone appears, and it's a woman. She walks alone, carefully, deliberately, with a heavy clay jar balanced on her shoulder. And as we'll soon discover, this Samaritan woman is alone because she is an outcast. You see, in that part of the world at that time, a woman's dignity was her lifeline. And once lost, there were very few ways back. Marriage was protection. Family was survival. But for reasons we can only guess, we're not told, perhaps loss, betrayal, death, rejection, bad choices, she has had 5 husbands, and the man she is now with is not one of them. So to her community, this is a marked woman. Her story is a whisper of scandal. And that's why she comes now in the heat of the day, at the hottest part of that midday sun, because it's the only time that she can come and not feel eyes watching her. She'd prefer to endure the heat of the sun than the heat of other people's shame pouring in on her. But to this woman's surprise, as she looks ahead now, she sees a man sitting by the well. Who is he? And why is he out here in the middle of the day? Well, we aren't left to wonder, having the Gospel of John written for us. We know from this biography that it is Jesus. And we know the lead up to this story here. He's been traveling with his friends from Judea in the south to Galilee in the north. And as you can see up on a map here, first century Israel was basically split into 3 regions: Judea in the south, Samaria in the middle, Galilee in the north. You can think of them like states in the modern sense of the term. Now, typically Jews traveling between the south and the north would avoid this middle area. They would go all the way around the Jordan River, crisscross it twice, just to avoid the Samaritans, because, for reasons we won't get into here, there were 500 years of bad blood between the Jews and the Samaritans. The Jews saw the Samaritans as racial half-breeds, religious heretics, cultural traitors. But on this journey, Jesus leads his friends not around, but right up through the middle of Samaria. And by the time they reach this town here outside of Sychar, this well outside of the town of Sychar, it's been a long day. The disciples are no doubt hungry and exhausted, as is Jesus. So the disciples head into town now to get some food. Jesus, however, stays by this well. Now, this well, by the way, here's a photo of the exact well as it stands and remains today. You can go visit it over there in the West Bank, although TripAdvisor might advise against that in the current climate. But this is Jacob's well now. It's no longer in a field. They've built a church around it. But the point of identifying this is history, this story that I'm telling you. This isn't just a fable or a legend. This is steeped in human history. That very photo there is the well that Jesus is sitting by as this Samaritan woman approaches now in the midday sun. Now, every cultural boundary, every moral taboo, every social religious convention says Jesus should keep his mouth shut. This is a man, she is a woman. He was a Jew, she was a Samaritan. He was a rabbi, she was someone considered by her village to be morally questionable at best. But he doesn't. She comes to the well with a heavy clay jar. He looks at her and he asks her for a drink. And stunned by this question, she replies, if you have a Bible, please feel free to follow along here, John 4, chapter 9. How is it that you, a man, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman, a Samaritan? This woman had spent her entire life being invisible, avoided, dismissed. And now suddenly she's seen. And not just seen, she's needed. Jesus doesn't avoid her story. He crosses every cultural convention to enter into it. He did it then, and folks, I think he still does it today. You and I may not carry clay jars to wells anymore today, but like this woman, we're all carrying a story, aren't we? Individually and collectively as a society. Our culture today is obsessed with being seen, because to be seen is to be valued. Visibility equals worth in today's cultural currency. That's why we post stories and selfies, not just to share life, but to get likes. That's why we go to the gym, not just to stay fit and healthy, although obviously that's a part of it, but it's also that we look good, right? We join causes not just because we believe in them, but because they give us a badge, a place to belong. Now, none of this is a criticism, all right? This is just an observation about our current cultural moment. I mean, think of the many slogans that we have out there today. Black Lives Matter. Love is love. Me too. Silence is violence. No pride in genocide. Whatever the merits of the various ideologies here, each one is a cry. See me. See this. See us. Not a criticism, an observation. Human longings for equality, for dignity, for rights, for justice, to be seen, to be recognized, affirmed. But here's the tension that we face today. The more we seem to push to try and be visible because we value those things so much, the more vulnerable our values become. Because in a world where everyone has a camera in their hand and a microphone in their pocket, visibility now comes with a high price tag. Every moment can be captured, screenshot, recorded and frozen forever on the internet. Our world tells us that to be seen is to be someone today, so we project ourselves out there into the world, but now we're terrified of the vulnerability. So what do? We start to edit and start to put on filters. We start to curate. What began as this desire to express now becomes pressure to impress, as self-expression turns into self-preservation, the longing to be known now shadowed by the fear of being found out. Is this familiar to anyone here? I think this goes a long way towards explaining our cultural moment. We've never had more ways to speak today, and yet we feel so hard to get our voice across. More ways to be seen, and yet we feel so invisible. More access to information, and yet we've never had less trust in our media sources today. And this isn't just a sentiment that I'm expressing from anecdotal experience. This is what the statistics are showing us. If you look at the ABS, for example, the latest statistic I found was 42.9% of Australians aged 16 to 85 have experienced a mental health disorder of one kind or another, with anxiety being right at the top and direct links being drawn to technology today. And again, last time I checked, the leading cause of death, premature death, particularly amongst young people, is still suicide. Why? Aren't we so far beyond all of these problems as a society? With all of our progress, shouldn't we be happier and healthier and wealthier and more whole? What is going on? Well, I think a really smart dead guy named G.K. Chesterton put his finger on it 100 years ago when he said, "The modern world is full of old Christian virtues gone mad, isolated from each other and wandering alone." In other words, we've kept some of Christianity's moral language, but we've lost the Christian story that gives it meaning. That's why some historians call this age that we're living in post-Christian. Not that everyone was once a Christian and now they're not anymore, but that we're living in a time that is post or after the influence of Christianity on our culture. We live today with a Christian conscience concerning things like equality and justice and dignity and rights and all of the rest, but we have no divine compass to orient our meaning for any one of those things. Make sense? And I think that's why so many of these values sit at the heart of our cultural conflicts today. We demand dignity, but we deny the God who gives it. We speak of grace, but we argue over who really deserves it, especially when we have to give it. We champion justice, but dismiss so often paths to mercy. And when we are the ones that define what is valuable, what happens when we decide that somebody no longer is? We cancel. We turn them off. We whisper behind their backs. We watch them as they walk to the well in the middle of the day, right? See, 1st century Samaria, 21st century Australia, different century, different wells, same shame, same need. This has always been the human story, folks. But look, Jesus doesn't scroll past this situation here. He doesn't project, he sits. He stays and he sees. And remember, she doesn't want to be seen, right? That's why she's out there in the middle of the day. That's why she comes out at noon when no one's around. So she's probably coming, and I'm just putting my own thoughts in here, she's probably coming guarded and tensed, bracing for impact. Who is this guy that's uncomfortably here now when I'm trying to escape everyone? But don't strap yourself in for a 1st century culture war here, because Jesus doesn't fight her. He disarms her. He reaches across every invisible divide in her story: gender, race, religion, status, morality. He crosses them all. How? Not with a manifesto, not with legislation, not with even a sermon, but with a simple question that appeals to shared humanity. Can I have a drink? Jesus puts himself where he can be truly seen by her, not just where he sees her, but where he can be seen by her, because he's a thirsty man. He doesn't have a jug to draw water. She does. And so for the first time in a long time, this Samaritan woman is seen, but she's not just seen and judged. She's not just seen and shamed. She's seen as somebody who is valuable to somebody else. And that's scene one here, recognition. A woman came to avoid being seen, but was seen by the one who sees all things. So why Jesus? Because in a world that confuses visibility with value, Jesus offers the dignity of being truly known. But being seen isn't enough here. We don't just want recognition, we want something that lasts. And that takes us now to scene two, satisfaction. The woman is standing here at this well, jar in hand, probably still trying to figure this Jesus bloke out. Why is this Jewish rabbi asking me for a drink? And look here at verse 10. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." Now, with a response like that, you can imagine the look on this woman's face, like she's blinking back sweat in the midday sun, right? She didn't come out here in the heat for some rabbinic lecture. She came out here for a drink. And what's this bloke even talking about? Living water. I mean, maybe a bit of heat stroke going on here. You can sense her instinct, can't you, to try and want to keep it simple, keep it safe, keep it surface, and just move on. So she kind of bounces his back and deflects from herself. And she goes, verse 11, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get this living water?" Now, try and appreciate where this Samaritan woman is coming from here, right? We don't live, at least here in Sydney, in an arid part of the world. Most of us have never known what it is to be thirsty like this, like true dehydration. But for her, water wasn't convenience. It was survival. And here, Jesus is tapping into that daily desperation. I mean, more than half of the human body is made up of water. 55% for females, 60% for males. When you dehydrate then, your tongue swells, you choke on it, you don't just dry out, you drain away from the inside out. You literally waste away. She probably had seen that in her life. And yet Jesus here has the audacity to say to her, even more than your body needs water, your soul needs living water. Verse 13, Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him or her will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. There it is. That's the undeniable gift, not just in tone here, the undeniable shift, not just in tone here, but in the substance of what Jesus is really offering her. She came to draw water. He came to draw her. She came to meet a daily need. He came to meet her eternal need. He began by asking for a drink. And now he's offering to satisfy her thirst, not with water from Jacob's well, but with living water, God's gift to flow from within. And so you can imagine her intrigue here now, can't you? Her body language may be shifting. Her eyes starting to narrow. She's probably still guarded. She's probably still cautious. She's had years of abuse and watching eyes. But maybe she starts to put down that jar as cynicism starts to give way to curiosity. And so she leans in and says, verse 15, "Sir, give me this water so that I may not be thirsty or have to come out here again to draw water." Now, she doesn't quite get it yet, right? She's still thinking about plumbing. Plumbing to the home, first on the block, that'd be great. But Jesus is talking about purpose. And so Jesus says to her, verse 16, "Go call your husband and come here." Now wait, why would Jesus say that? Nice conversation here about hydration. Why does Jesus go there? I mean, why pivot to her messy relationship past? Is it to shame her? Is it to pile on with the village gossip? No, Jesus is helping her move from that physical that she's deflecting to all the time to the deeper spiritual that he's trying to lean into here. Go call your husband is not condemnation, it's conviction. It's an invitation for this woman to name the thirst beneath her thirst. Verse 17, the woman answered him, "I have no husband." And Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying I have no husband, for you have 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not one of them. The one you are living with now is not one of them." Jesus isn't saying this to shame her. He's trying to save her from the wells that she's been drawing from: male approval, relational security, acceptance, belonging, stability, love. Shallow wells that inevitably run dry. She's had 5 husbands, and the man she's with is not one of them. That's what Jesus is saying here. Not you're a dirty, sinful woman, but you're thirsty. And can't you see that you're thirsty because you're drinking from dry, shallow wells? But again, I don't think this is just her story all those years ago. I think we can all relate to this in some way today. Quite obviously, I don't know everyone here today. I don't know the jars of whatever you've brought in on your shoulders today, metaphorically speaking. I'm just the guest speaker. I get to show up, do a few cannonballs, splash around, and leave it to Judy and Ryan to mop up the mess. But I do know a thing or two about human nature because I happen to be one of those, right? Some of you might be here thinking, Christian or not Christian, right? You might be thinking, I wish I had faith like that. I wish I could believe like that. I wish I could receive this living water that Jesus is offering. I'm not feeling it. I'm not smelling what you're stepping in, Dave. But hear me on this. Jesus never asks anyone to come to him with perfect faith. You don't have to check your brain at the door today. This isn't about having some right feeling or secret knowledge before you can come and be presentable. You don't have to manufacture saving faith. You have to relocate it. You have to transfer it from where you have already placed it in life and now put it into Jesus. Because whether you realize it or not, we're all drinking from wells. They might be your career. They might be retirement. Might be your image. Might be your service. Might be your romance, your family, control, admiration, acceptance. That is what Jesus is identifying here when he says to this woman, go call your husband. He's not changing the subject. He's naming her well. Can you name your wells? Don't tell me you don't got them. We all do. How are they working out for you? You feeling thirsty? Maybe thinking, Dave, no, I'm not, man. Like, I'm feeling pretty good right now. I'm stoked with the election results. Just landed some sweet job. House is nearly paid off. Kids are in school or out of the house. All good things, right? Like, be thankful for those things in your life, okay? But here's my question. What happens when it's not all good? When the job changes, when the government changes, when the finances get tight, when the kids mess up. And hey, maybe you have one of those homes that's just rare and beautiful and sunshine and giggles and dolphins in the backyard. Even then, family isn't forever. You know, I'm so thankful for my beautiful home and my beautiful wife and my two beautiful little babies at home, 5 and 3. Though it is absolutely not always sunshine and giggles, let me tell you. But if there's one thing that the future guarantees for our house, it's that there will be funerals. There will be funerals. So what do you do when even a well as deep as family love runs dry? What do you do when the best parts of all that this life has to offer you still leave you feeling thirsty? I mean, what's the greater disappointment, to not get what you want in this life, or to get it and then find that it was not enough at all to begin with? Perhaps that is the greater disappointment. Not that life will sometimes upset us and hurt us, but so many of us go through life and settle for a life that can't help but disappoint us. Do you see how convicting this is? Jesus isn't saying to this woman, don't ever enjoy other worlds. That's not what this is about, okay? Jesus is saying, don't depend on them to satisfy your soul. And that's why Jesus doesn't just offer this woman another well to run to and drink from and let it dry out, but a spring of water welling up to eternal life. Let me just tell you a true story to try and unpack this for you. As I was preparing this message earlier in the week, I got to this very verse here about a spring of water. I looked out my study window at home and it was bucketing down. I don't know if you saw the news there in Newcastle. It was bad, right? And part of this embankment in our backyard started to collapse. You can see it up here on the screen. This is bad news for me, right? Because I've spent so much time and so much money rebuilding our backyard. I had heavy machinery in, we recontoured everything, got this slope in, built a fire pit. It was looking so good until this week. After I'd finished this a couple of months ago, by the way, I was chatting with an old neighbour up the back who used to own our block back in the 60s. He's real old. And he was saying, yeah, where you've got your fire pit right there, you might want to watch that, because there was a natural spring of water, a groundwater that would come through there. And I actually dammed it up where your fire pit is right there back in the day. Now, it would have been nice to have known that before, I went and spent all of this time and money putting it into the fire pit in the backyard there. But that's what springs do. You can fill a well and concrete it over and plant a garden on top and forget that it ever existed. But you can't do that with groundwater. You can shift the soil, you can raise the ground, you can try to redirect it, but no matter how much dirt you pile on, eventually the water's going to find a way through. And that's what Jesus is saying here that living water does. It's something he places inside of you. It's something that is a gift from him, so therefore it's not dependent on you and your circumstances that may or may not run dry. It's a spring of living water that wells up to eternal life that no betrayal can break, folks. That no diagnosis can drown. That no wound can block. That no loss ultimately can take away. Living water that flows through every high and every low of your life, even the depths of the grave, because, oh, by the way, then it's just spilling out into eternity as death now becomes a comma in the sentence of your story, going for a very long time in one direction. That's what Jesus offers this woman. That's what Jesus offers you. Not a life that's always going to be easy, not a life that's always going to feel good, but a spring that never runs dry, a source of life that lasts when everything else will leave you feeling empty. So that's scene 2 here, satisfaction. A woman comes with a jar hoping to fill, but left with a spring that no drought could still. So why Jesus? Because in a world of restless striving, Jesus gives the soul-deep satisfaction we were all made for. But again, that's not the end of the story here. We have one final scene, because this living water doesn't just flow to fill you, it overflows to others around you. Watch this now with the third and final scene of transformation. Verse 19, it's almost like this woman has a last-ditch effort now to try and change the subject. She says, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say in Jerusalem that that's the place where people ought to worship." You see what she's doing here? She's doing what I think we all do when somebody gets a little bit too close with conviction. We don't always lean in, we tend to lash out, as shame can lead to blame. Jesus touches her wound, and she throws up a theological smokescreen and hides behind religion. "Okay, Mr. Jesus, if you know so much, answer me this one then. You Jews worship in Jerusalem, we worship here on Mount Gerizim. Who is right? Who is wrong?" Don't we ask questions like that today? With so many different religions and beliefs here in Australia, particularly a corner of Sydney like this. "Okay, Mr. Christian, why do you think you're right? What about the Muslim? What about the Hindu? What about the Buddhist? What about just the nice non-Christian neighbour up the road?" Well, listen to what Jesus says here, verse 21. "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father." The woman says, verse 25, "I know that the Messiah is coming, and when he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Jesus doesn't get defensive and start a culture war here and engage with the politics. He doesn't pick sides on the political aisle. He's not looking left or right. He's looking right at this woman. And as a consequence, she's looking right at him. And what does she see now? She sees the one who has reached across every invisible divide in her story. Again, gender, race, religion, status, morality. Who is this Jesus to do that? Well, he's not just a man, not just a Jew, not just a rabbi, not just a prophet. He's the Messiah, the promised one of Israel, come not just for Israel, Genesis 12, but to bless all the nations. How? By dealing with the thirst beneath all thirsts. That's how. You know, when you open up your Bible, you read there on page 1 that in the beginning, it was the God of Israel who made the world and everything in it. And it was good, 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 good. 7 times we're told that. Humanity lived in harmony. Life and love, purpose planted in us from God. We didn't need a well back then because we had this thing called a tree of life. But turn the page and we read that we reached for another tree. We dug our own wells, broken cisterns that can hold no water. That is this unpopular word we call sin. Not just bad behavior. It's trying to live life apart from the source. And if God is the source of life, then to live apart from him can only lead to one place, and that is death. That's why the Bible says things like the wages of sin is death. Physical death because we need water to live. Spiritual death because we need a spring that wells up to eternal life. So when Jesus says here, the hour is coming, what's the hour that he's talking about? All throughout John's gospel, this phrase, the hour, points to the cross, the hour of Jesus' death. John 2, John 4, John 5, John 12, John 17. That's why Jesus doesn't get lost in the smoke screen here. This isn't about temples or places of sacrifice and mountains, because he is the temple. He is the sacrifice. I who speak to you am he. He is the gift, not a place, a person. And it's haunting when you think about this, folks. The fact that Jesus begins this conversation by saying to this woman, "I thirst," and only in a matter of months, he would say the exact same thing, only this time not sitting by a well, but hanging on a cross. The hour of the cross. What we celebrated here a couple of weeks ago, remember Good Friday? in that moment when Jesus experienced both physical and spiritual dehydration. He literally drained away from the inside out. But what makes Good Friday good? Well, it's not the horrible reality of Jesus dying. It's what his death means in light of Resurrection Sunday, the day of the dawn beyond that empty tomb when Jesus walked out alive. Jesus died of thirst so that we could receive his living water. Jesus died the death we all deserved and rose to give us the life we were made for in the beginning. That is the gospel. That is the good news of Jesus that reaches across every invisible human line that we draw, because we all stand flat-footed at the foot of the cross in need of this good news message. Doesn't matter if you're a Jew, doesn't matter if you're a Samaritan, doesn't matter if you're black, white, vote left, vote right, girl, boy, saint, horrific moral mess. We all need this gift. Jesus meets you in the midday sun of your story. And I've got to say this now, at the risk of being a little offensive to someone here, I don't know. You don't get this message anywhere else. That's why I'm a Christian. Every other worldview or story tries to make sense of life by basically saying, and I'm doing this shorthand, okay, for the sake of time, basically saying, you got to do more good than bad and then hope for the best when you die. The 5 pillars of Islam, the 8-fold path of Buddhism, the Hindu doctrine of karma, the 5 constants of Confucianism, the 613 laws of Judaism, or just the, you know what, just be a good bloke attitude of so many Aussies here in Australia. Draw. Jesus says, drink. Drink. And in a word, this is called grace. And it's a gift. It's God's work, not your work. And that's why it works, folks. That's why Jesus. This is the most radically inclusive message you will ever hear, exclusively in Jesus. And suddenly it all makes sense to this woman. Verse 28, she left her water jar and went away into town, and she said to the people, "Come, see a man who told me all that I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" And the village folk, they went out from the town and they were coming to see him. Would you look at that? What a turnaround. Think about where we began just a little moment ago, and now look at this. The very reason this woman was out there in the first place was to avoid all of these people, right? And now she's running straight towards them. Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Look, she's not invisible anymore. Her old self-image is gone. That doesn't mean all of her problems are gone. Not at all. What it means is that Jesus defines her now, not those problems. Like, look here, verse 28, the woman left her water jar. That doesn't mean she's not going to come back and get it. That doesn't mean she doesn't need it anymore. It means Jesus is number one in her life now. That's what it means. The love of God has so filled her to the brim that now it is overflowing. Check this, even towards those who were so unloving towards her. She doesn't care how they see her anymore. She just wants them to see Jesus through her. Like, what a turnaround. The shame that made her hide now becomes the story to help other people see. Recognition, satisfaction, transformation. She came invisible into this world, and ladies and gentlemen, her story today is told all around our world. In 1,000 years, you and I will be forgotten. Not this woman. Not this woman. Because God delights to stage his glory in the places we try to hide, transforming shame into a testimony of his saving grace. That's the third and final scene here, transformation. A woman came to hide her shame, but ran with joy, now bearing his name. Her story became the invitation for others to come and see, and she's the first cross-cultural missionary in the Gospel of John. Don't you love that? So why Jesus? Because only Jesus can turn your greatest wounds into a witness of his grace. So I want to thank you again for having me here. It's been a privilege to be here. But let's just be real for a second. I've had 40 minutes. Sorry, I've gone a bit over time here. But I've had 40 minutes or something to try and answer one of the biggest questions in life. There's so much more that we could say here, so much more that needs to be said. But I haven't tried to say it all here. My goal has been a little bit more modest than that. If I can get you just to verse 15 of John chapter 4, where this woman says, "Sir, give me this water." Curious. She didn't have it all figured out. She still had her questions, but her cynicism was chipped away with curiosity. If you're at that point, then I would say, job well done today. Because maybe you're here and maybe you are curious. Maybe you're wondering, maybe you have questions. That's good. Truth invites questions and stands up under scrutiny. And I want to encourage you now to come back, because that's literally what you're doing here at Haven COC, is you are asking for a friend. You're going through some of these questions, but this is just the beginning of the series here. So bring them, bring your doubts, bring your friends, come thirsty and watch the Spirit of the living God fill you up to the brim, to overflowing. And if you've already tasted this water and you're here today and maybe you're feeling like, but I'm not feeling it like this Samaritan woman, right? Maybe you're struggling to feel that there is this spring welling up within you. I just want to say the same thing to you. Brother, sister, whoever you are, wherever you're sitting now in this room, leave the jar and come and drink from the good news of Jesus again and again and again. I work for an organization called Questioning Christianity because I have more questions now than I've ever had before. This is a daily nourishment that we need. You don't done and did the gospel and get on with life. You come back to it again and again and again. And if you're thinking, mate, you don't know me, I'm too far gone, dude. You don't know my story. You're right. I don't know your story. But I know this one. A woman came to avoid being seen, but she was seen by the one who sees all things. She came with a jar hoping to fill, but left with a spring no drought could still. She came to the well to hide her shame, but ran with joy now bearing his name. Recognition, satisfaction, transformation. It's a gift, folks. It's a gift. That's ultimately why that's why it needs to be a good news headline today, because you can't be too far gone. This world can't be too bomb blasted and broken, because it's not about the heat of the midday sun. It's about the fact that Jesus is sitting by that well and he sees you and he wants to have a conversation.